It's just a brief video on Barnett Pearce's book, Making Social Worlds. And in that book, he works through different ways that you can change the meanings in a group. And these were just a few of the ways that he works at that. Um, so you're trying to change the narrative. We've talked about legitimating narratives. So one way within a group to do that is to construct a richer story, that they're living inside of a smaller story, and you're wanting to make it richer. You're wanting to show that there's actually more to their story than they're currently aware of. Part of that is how do they help understand the others? So if they've come to a too small understanding of who we are, um, then you can start introducing them to more of the diversity of their narrative, the differences in their narrative, the historical context. So, for instance, their origin stories, God moments in their stories, just anything that actually gets them out of the narrower story that they're living in. So they see at times there's been other elements of faithfulness, or times when a neighbor or a person who is different made a difference. So all of that are constructing a different story, a richer story about themselves than what they've been aware of. Sometimes this works into tradition. Sometimes this works into cultural histories, or other times just their own organization's history. Construct a more systemic or systematic description. That means you're trying to find patterns in their stories that they've forgotten about. That both they can be instructive, they can develop hope, they can show why things haven't worked, all of those different things. So I can remember working on with a church search committee, and it was pretty easy to find out as an ethnic church, all they had ever done before is they would find out pastors in their system who were of their ethnicity, and then find out who's available. So basically, that's just it. Who else is of this particular Asian culture, and who's looking for a job? Now, that means you're going to get a certain qualities of a pastor, but that's all they'd ever done, and their lack of traction, the lack of generativity in the group, it's pretty profound. And it's because they always had just searched what's possible, who looks like us, and that had been kind of the all there was to it. Same things happen with churches regarding youth programs. It's not unusual for churches that are near seminaries to simply say, "Who do you have? Let's put another seminary intern in charge of our youth," rather than owning the development of young adults as a system wide, as a church wide, as every all hands on deck. The sense that you can outsource this to a seminary intern had been the normal narrative. That's the narrative, once they saw it, needed to change. Shape an awareness of how participants create a new world. Often participants in a church don't know that they actually have the access to create something new. This is why we'll often work with small experiment teams, design teams, where they actually find out, they may think, I'm not chairing a committee, I'm not writing the strategic plan, but just by doing an experiment and bringing that story back, they start realizing that they're creating a new world. This is Paulo Freire's work. They actually are creating a new world by their experiment, and then that empowers them. Changing the context. There's a couple of ways this happens. One is where you're actually bringing new materials in. So a lectio exercise may bring in reflections on biblical text that changes. You've broadened their context. You're saying you're part of a tribe. This tribe includes Old Testament, New Testament scriptures. This is part of who we are, and here's a story from us. So part of it is the way you bring materials in. Another way is how do you get the people out? So field trips, time at other churches, time at cultural sites, simply ways to expand where we are, what we're doing, who we know, what we know. And all of that changes the context and creates new interpretive options for what is relevant. Finally, attend to the kind of energy present. And this is especially true when you're looking at deficit energy and appreciative energy. So appreciative inquiry, where you would actually ask questions. Talk about a time where you met someone of another culture and it was a positive experience. Or can you think of at a time that our culture and another culture interacted well? I remember when a Japanese American church, through some help, learned about some early labor issues. This is actually in the Oxnard area. Learned about some labor issues in which the Japanese and the Americans and the Mexican Americans, through their own partnership, changed the shape of the union there that was being dismissive, in this case, of the Mexican Americans. And the Japanese Americans just said, if you won't deal with us, then we're sticking with them. We're not going to go with you. and it changed the whole structure of unionization and therefore the way the contracts were being written with the farmers. So just think through different ways of how do you change the story? How do you change the narrative? What resources are available? Who can be a player in creating those new narratives? What stories matter? What stories belong in this? All that's part of Pearce's work on making social worlds.